The year is 1988. The air in the VFW hall is thick, stale coffee and desperation. Farmers stand along the back wall. Their arms are crossed. Their faces are grim. This is a foreclosure auction. Another family farm going under. The bankman is here, Mr. Abernathy, retired now, but he comes to these things, a kind of ritual. He sits in the front row, always in the same folding chair. He wears a wool suit, even in August. He represents the old way, the way things are done. The auctioneer starts the bidding. The property is 320 acres, prime bottomland. A house, 2 barns, a lifetime of work. The bidding is slow, anxious. It climbs in small increments, 1,000 at a time. It stalls at $280,000. A silence falls over the room. Going once, the auctioneer's voice echoes. Going twice. Mr. Abernathy nods slightly. He knows the bank's reserve price. They'll get their money. From the back of the room, a voice speaks, clear, calm. 312,000. Heads turn. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Who said that? A man walks forward. He is in his early 50s. His work clothes are clean but worn. His hands are calloused. He looks at no one, only at the auctioneer. The auctioneer squints. "Sir, that's a significant jump. Can you show proof of funds?" The man nods. He walks to the front table. He sets down an old leather briefcase. The latches click open. He doesn't pull out a checkbook. He doesn't show a letter of credit. He pulls out stacks of cashier's checks, bound with rubber bands. He lays them on the table, one stack after another. The room is dead silent. You can hear a man's watch tick. The man straightens the stacks into a neat rectangle. He smooths the top check with his thumb. $312,000. Cash. He says it quietly. The auctioneer is speechless. He just stares at the money. Mr. Abernathy leans forward in his chair. He squints. He recognizes the face. He knows that quiet confidence. It takes him a moment. 33 years fall away, and he remembers a boy, a 19-year-old boy, standing in his bank office, asking for a loan. A boy he had turned away. A boy he told had no business trying to save a farm. A boy he told it just wasn't his time. This is the story of that boy, and the 33 years it took to prove a kind man wrong. This is a story about the difference between what people think you are capable of and what is written in the dirt itself. These are the stories we tell, the ones that get forgotten, the ones that live in the silence between generations. If you believe these stories matter, if you believe they need to be told, subscribe to this channel. Because what happened next is more than just a farm auction. It's a lesson. Let's go back to 1955, the year James Collier's world fell apart. His father died in March, a heart attack behind the wheel of a John Deere Model G. He was 42 years old. He left behind a wife, 2 daughters, and a 19-year-old son. He also left behind debt, a lot of it. The post-war boom was a tightrope. New equipment cost a fortune. Fertilizer prices were climbing. His father had taken out loans to expand. He bet on the future. He just didn't live to see it. The bank owned most of the equipment. They held the note on 160 of their 240 acres. The letters started coming in April. Polite at first, then less so. James's mother was lost in grief. His sisters were too young to understand. It was all on him. He was 19. He knew how to work. He had been driving a tractor since he was 8. He knew the land, every rise, every creek bed. He knew the smell of the soil before a rain. But he didn't know about banks. He didn't know about amortization schedules. He didn't know about covenants and default clauses. He just knew he couldn't lose the farm. It was everything. It was the only thing. So he put on his father's church suit. It was too big in the shoulders. He shined his work boots. He took the shoebox full of bank notices and loan papers. and he drove the family's Ford pickup into town to see Mr. Abernathy at the Farmers' Trust and Savings. Frank Abernathy was a pillar of the community. He was on the school board. He was a deacon at the church. He coached Little League. He had known James's father his whole life. He was a good man. Everyone said so. His office was quiet, smelled of wood polish and old paper. James sat in a leather chair that swallowed him. He laid the papers on the polished desk. Mr. Abernathy put on his glasses. He looked through everything, slowly, methodically. He made notes on a yellow legal pad. He didn't say a word for 10 minutes. James just sat there, his hands sweating, his heart pounding against his ribs. Finally, Mr. Abernathy took off his glasses. He sighed. He leaned back in his chair. "James," he said. His voice was gentle, kind. "Your father was a good man, a hard worker, but he got in a little over his head here." James nodded. "Yes, sir, I know. But I can make it work. I'll work day and night. I can pay it back. I just need you to consolidate these loans. Give me some breathing room. Give me a chance." Mr. Abernathy looked at the boy. He saw the desperation in his eyes, the earnest plea, and he felt a genuine sense of pity, a sense of responsibility. He believed he needed to protect this boy from himself, from a burden too heavy to carry. "Son, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen this story 100 times. Farming is a tough business for a grown man. It's no place for a boy, not with this kind of debt load." James felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "I'm not a boy, sir. I'm a farmer." Mr. Abernathy gave him a sad smile, the kind of smile you give someone you know is about to learn a hard lesson. "You're 19 years old. You have no credit history. You have no assets that aren't already leveraged. The bank's board would never approve this. It would be fiscally irresponsible. I can't in good conscience lend you more money. I'd be setting you up to fail. But this is my home." James's voice was barely a whisper. "My family's home." "I know, son, and I am truly sorry for your loss and for your situation. Here's what I think you should do. Sell the 160 acres that are mortgaged. That will clear the debt. You'll have the original 80 acres free and clear. The house, the main barn. You can get a town job. Farm the 80 on the side. It's a good, sensible plan. It's the best way forward." It was a kind suggestion, delivered with paternal certainty. It was also a death sentence. Selling the land was giving up. It was admitting his father had failed. It was admitting he would fail. "No," James said. Just the one word. Mr. Abernathy's face hardened slightly. The kindness remained, but a layer of steel appeared underneath. "James, you're not listening. A 19-year-old has no business trying to manage this kind of operation. You need experience. You need capital. You have neither. I'm not going to be the man who helps you lose your family's last 80 acres. It's just not your time, son." That phrase. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was worse. It was a final judgment delivered with a gentle voice. A door closed not with a slam, but with a quiet, polite click. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Certainty about another person's capabilities, delivered with kindness. It's more damaging than outright hostility, because you can't fight it with anger. It can only be disproven, with decades of work. James stood up. The suit still felt too big. He gathered the papers from the desk. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Abernathy," he said. His voice was flat, empty. He walked out of the bank, into the bright sunlight. He didn't go straight home. He drove to the edge of town, to the small cemetery. He stood at his father's grave, a fresh plot of turned earth. He told him what the banker said. He told him it was over. He stood there for an hour, as the sun started to set. Then he went home, to face his mother. He walked into the farmhouse kitchen. His grandfather was sitting at the table, his father's father, Samuel Collier. He was 75. His hands were gnarled with arthritis, but his eyes were clear. He had been watching from the window. He saw the slump in James's shoulders. He didn't ask what happened. He knew. He just pointed to the chair opposite him. "Sit down, boy." James sat. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the worn wood of the table. Samuel let the silence hang in the air. He let the weight of the day settle. Then he spoke. His voice was rough, like stones in a creek bed. "They took your father's signature. They put it on a piece of paper. That paper says they own the crop. It says they own the machines. It says they own the land. But they don't own the dirt." He leaned forward. He looked right into James's eyes. "They can take everything, but they can't take the dirt. The dirt is enough." Those words, "the dirt is enough." They weren't a plan. They were a foundation, something solid to stand on when the whole world was shaking. James looked up from the table. He met his grandfather's gaze. And for the first time that day, he felt something other than fear. He felt a flicker of defiance. "What do we do?" he asked. Samuel leaned back. A slow smile spread across his face. "We get to work." Let me tell you about the next 5 years. They weren't a montage of triumphs. They were a grinding, day-by-day war of attrition. The bank sent a notice of intent to foreclose. They had 90 days. The first thing James did was sell his father's new tractor, the John Deere G. He sold it to a neighbor for cash. He used that money to make the most immediate payment to the bank, buying himself a little more time. Then he sold the family's second car. He sold 20 head of cattle. He scraped together enough to keep the bank at bay, month by month, but it wasn't enough. He still had to run the farm. Without the new tractor, he was left with his grandfather's old one, a 1939 Farmall F20. It was underpowered. It was unreliable. It was all he had. His grandfather, Samuel, became his shadow. He couldn't do the heavy work anymore, but he could teach. He taught James how to fix the old tractor, how to fabricate parts from scrap metal, how to listen to the engine and know what it needed. He taught him the old ways, the ways before big bank loans and expensive equipment, crop rotation that replenished the soil naturally, saving seeds from the strongest plants, using manure from their own animals instead of buying commercial fertilizer. The dirt is enough. It became their mantra. James worked from before sunrise until after sunset. He didn't just farm his own land. He took on contract work, plowing fields for neighbors, baling hay, repairing fences, anything for cash. He worked for the same men who sat in the VFW hall and watched auctions. The men who shook their heads and said the Collier boy was going to lose it all. He took their money. He saved every penny. He paid the bank, every month, on time. He didn't live like a 19-year-old. He didn't go to dances. He didn't have a girlfriend. He didn't have friends. He had the farm, and the debt, and the quiet voice of his grandfather. The dirt is enough. Mr. Abernathy would see him in town sometimes, driving the old, rusty Farmall, covered in grease and dirt. He would nod politely, a sad, knowing nod. He was just waiting for the boy to give up, to come to his senses and take his sensible advice. He told his wife over dinner one night, "I feel for that Collier boy. He's working himself to death for nothing. It's a shame to see. He truly believed it. He wasn't a villain. He was a man of certainty. He knew how the world worked, and in his world, James Collier was already finished. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something by someone who thought they were protecting you? Someone who sounded so reasonable, so kind, so certain. What did that feel like? Drop a comment below, because this is where the story turns. This is where the quiet work starts to speak for itself. By 1960, 5 years after his father's death, something strange was happening on the Collier farm. It was solvent. James had not missed a single payment. He had paid down a surprising amount of the principal. He did it through brutal efficiency. His input costs were a fraction of his neighbors. He wasn't buying new equipment. He wasn't buying fertilizer. He wasn't buying patented seeds. His yields weren't as high as the farms with all the modern chemistry, but his profit margins were higher, much higher. Contrast math. A neighbor might gross $150 an acre on corn, but spend $120 on inputs, for a net profit of $30 an acre. James might only gross $120 an acre, but his input costs were just $40. His net profit was $80 an acre, more than double. The dirt was enough. The bankers didn't understand this math. They only understood gross yields and new equipment. But the land understood. The land was healing. Years of intensive chemical farming had depleted it. James and Samuel were bringing it back to life. The community started to notice. The doubters were still there. They'd say his fields looked weedy. They'd say he was farming like it was the Great Depression. But others saw something else. They saw a man who owed nothing to anybody. They saw a farm that was getting healthier year after year. One neighbor, a man named George Peterson, stopped by one evening. His own new tractor was broken down. The dealer said it would be a week to get the part. Planting season was slipping away. George was in a panic. He came to James, hat in hand. He asked if he could hire James to plow his fields. The same man who once told others James was a fool. James didn't gloat. He didn't bring up the past. He just nodded. "I'll be there in the morning." He plowed George's fields with the old Farmall F20. He did a better job than the new machine. The rows were straighter. The soil was turned just right. When he was done, George tried to pay him. James shook his head. No charge. George was stunned. Why not? James looked out over the freshly plowed field. "My dad always said you were the first one to show up when a neighbor needed help. Just paying it forward." He drove the old tractor home, leaving George Peterson standing there in the middle of his field. Word of that spread through the county, faster than gossip. It was a quiet act of grace, and it changed how people saw him. He wasn't just the stubborn Collier boy anymore. He was his father's son. That same year, his grandfather Samuel passed away, peacefully in his sleep. He was 80 years old. He had lived to see the farm saved. He had lived to see his grandson become a man. His last words to James the night before were simple. "Keep going, boy. The dirt is enough." James kept going. Now, let me tell you about the next 28 years. Because this is where the story becomes bigger. This is where quiet work becomes a quiet empire. The expansion started in 1962. A small 40-acre parcel next to his came up for sale. The owner had died. His children wanted to sell quickly. James went to the estate auction. He stood in the back. He didn't say a word until the very end. He made one bid, slightly above the last, and he bought it. The lawyer handling the sale asked him which bank would be handling the financing. James shook his head. No bank. He opened a canvas bag, and he paid for it. Cash. The year was 1962. 40 acres. cash. By 1965, he had paid off the last of his father's debt to Mr. Abernathy's bank. He walked into the Farmers' Trust and Savings. He handed the final payment to a young teller. Mr. Abernathy was in his office. He saw James through the glass. He didn't come out. He just watched. A look on his face that James couldn't quite decipher. Not anger, not contempt. Something softer, and in some ways worse. Confusion. The world was not working the way he was certain it worked. The year was 1968. An 80-acre farm on his western border went up for auction. James was there. He bought it. Cash. The year was 1973. The original 160 acres his father had mortgaged. The land Mr. Abernathy had advised him to sell. It came back on the market. The farmer who owned it was retiring. James didn't even let it go to auction. He went to the man's house. He sat at his kitchen table. They drank coffee. They talked about the weather. They talked about their fathers. Then James made an offer. A fair price. Well above market value. The man looked at him. He knew the story. Everyone knew the story by then. He smiled. "My friend, I think this land has been waiting for you to come home." James bought back his father's land. Cash. The rhythm of the decades was the same. Work, save, buy. He never borrowed a dime. Not once. He didn't trust banks. He didn't trust paper promises. He trusted the dirt. And he trusted cash. The year was 1977. 100 acres. Cash. The year was 1982. 240 acres. Cash. The year was 1985. Another 160 acres. Cash. He wasn't just buying land. He was improving it. He was a pioneer in what would later be called regenerative agriculture. He built up the topsoil. He planted cover crops. He created wildlife habitats. His farm was an island of deep green in a sea of chemical brown. Other farmers started to copy his methods, quietly at first. They'd ask him questions at the co-op. They'd stop by the farm. He never preached. He just showed them. He taught them what his grandfather had taught him. The dirt is enough. He became a respected figure, not because he was rich. Nobody knew how much money he had. He still drove an old pickup truck. He still wore work clothes. He lived in the same small farmhouse he grew up in. He was respected because he was free. He was his own man. He didn't answer to a banker. He answered only to the seasons and to the soil. All the while, Mr. Abernathy watched, from a distance. He retired in 1980, but he stayed in town. He'd drive his Buick through the countryside, and he'd always pass the Collier farm. He saw it grow. He saw the new barns, built by James and his neighbors, not by a construction company. He saw the healthy crops. He saw the land come alive. It was a quiet, 30-year-long refutation of his certainty. He never spoke to James about it. He never admitted he was wrong. He just watched. A silent witness to a story he had tried to end before it began. Which brings us back to 1988. Back to the VFW hall, the air thick with the smell of defeat. The farm being auctioned belonged to the son of one of Mr. Abernathy's old clients, a family that had always followed the bank's advice. Modernize, expand, leverage. And now they were losing everything. Mr. Abernathy felt a pang of sadness, but not surprise. This was how the world worked, the inevitable cycle. Then James Collier spoke from the back of the room. 312,000. And everything Mr. Abernathy thought he knew, tilted on its axis. When James laid the cash on the table, it wasn't a boast, it was a statement. It was the final word in a 33-year-long conversation. The auctioneer, finally composing himself, slammed the gavel down. "Sold! To Mr. James Collier." A wave of applause broke out in the room, spontaneous, genuine. The farmers in the back, the ones with the crossed arms and grim faces, they were clapping. Some were smiling for the first time all day. It wasn't just about one man buying a piece of land. It was a victory for all of them. A victory against the banks, against the system that was slowly crushing them. One of them had made it. One of them had beaten the house. James just nodded to the auctioneer. He put the leftover checks back in his briefcase. He turned to leave, and his eyes met Mr. Abernathy's. The old banker was standing now. His face was pale. He looked shaken. He took a step toward James. He opened his mouth to say something. "James," he began. His voice was frail. He stopped. What could he say? "I'm sorry? I was wrong?" How do you apologize for 3 decades of doubt? How do you put a price on the years of struggle you caused? Not with malice, but with kindness, with certainty. James looked at the old man. He saw the regret in his eyes, the lifetime of conviction crumbling in a single moment, and he felt no anger. He felt no triumph. He only felt a deep, quiet sadness for the boy who had to do it all alone. He spoke. His voice was not loud, but it carried through the silent room. "You were just trying to protect me," he said. That was all. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked out of the VFW hall, into the afternoon sun, leaving Frank Abernathy standing there, alone with the ghost of his own certainty. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. But that's not the end of the story, because what James did next changed everything. He didn't farm the new land himself. The next day, he found the family who had been foreclosed on, the Millers, a young couple with 2 small children. They were packing their belongings, their faces etched with shame and fear. James knocked on their door. He introduced himself. He asked them to take a walk with him. He walked them out to the edge of the property. He picked up a handful of dirt. He let it run through his fingers. "This is good land," he said. "It just needs to be treated right." The young farmer, Tom Miller, just stared at the ground. "It's not my land anymore." James looked at him. He saw the same desperation he had felt at 19. He made a decision. "I'm not a banker," he said, "and I don't want to be a landlord. I want a partner." He offered them a deal. They could work the farm, live in the house. He would provide the equipment, all his own, paid in cash. He would teach them his methods. They would split the profits, 50-50. After 5 years, they would have the option to buy the farm from him, for the exact price he paid for it, with 0% interest. Tom Miller was speechless. He thought it was a joke, a cruel trick. "Why?" he finally stammered. "Why would you do this for us?" James looked at the man's children, hiding behind their mother's legs. "Because someone's banker once told me it wasn't my time," he said. "I want to make sure it's yours." The Millers took the deal. They became the first of many. James Collier spent the rest of his life doing what the banks wouldn't. He created his own system, a system built on trust, not credit scores. A system built on soil health, not leveraged assets. He bought over 2,000 acres of farmland in his lifetime. He never farmed them himself. He placed a young family on every single one. He gave them the same deal he gave the Millers. He called it the Dirt Legacy Program. He created a co-op to sell their produce directly to consumers, cutting out the middlemen, ensuring they got a fair price. He created a scholarship for kids from farm families to study sustainable agriculture. He never put his name on any of it. He didn't want the credit. He just wanted the work to continue. The legacy wasn't the land he owned. It was the families he set free. The ripple effect of that one man's quiet defiance. It changed the entire county. James Collier passed away in 2015. He was 79 years old. He died in the same house he was born in. He left the farm to his children, and they to their children. They still run it the same way. The old Farmall F20 tractor. The one that saved the farm. It doesn't run anymore, but it sits in the main barn, polished and clean. A physical artifact of a promise kept. A reminder. Today, if you visit that farmhouse, his grandson will take you into the old office, and on the wall there's a simple wooden frame. Inside, it isn't a picture, it's a letter, dated April 14th, 1955. From the Farmer's Trust and Savings. It's the loan denial letter, signed by Frank Abernathy. His grandson will tell you James put it there the day he paid off the farm, not as a trophy, not out of spite, as a reminder. A reminder that the most significant obstacles we face often come with a kind face and a reasonable voice. A reminder of what is possible when you stop listening to the certainty of others and start listening to the quiet promise of the dirt beneath your feet. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being told they can't. They're being told they're not ready, not smart enough, not experienced enough. They're being told it's just not their time. And the person telling them this might be a boss, a teacher, a banker, or even a parent. And they might be saying it because they genuinely believe they are helping. They believe they are protecting them from failure. This story is a reminder that their certainty is not your reality. Their map is not your territory. Your potential is not determined by their assessment. It is determined by your work, by your persistence, by your refusal to accept the limits they place on you. If this story means something to you, if you know someone who is being told they can't, someone who needs to hear that the dirt is enough, share this video with them. These are the stories that build us, the stories that remind us of who we are and who we can be. Subscribe for more stories of quiet triumph. And in the comments, tell us about a time you chose to believe in yourself when someone else's kindness told you not to. Thank you for listening.